This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
I would like to acknowledge that the Militantly Mixed podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Karankawa people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of that nation, both past and present. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka Mix Auntie Maine, the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist, comic book nerd, cat mom, mask making, Gulf Coast Cosmos comic book co-owning Asian American Podcasters Association's Golden Crane Award winning podcaster in this podcasting game. This is episode 149, and my guest today is Leah Ko. They're a recent listener of the show in like the last 6 or so months, and they've been dealing with their own mixed race identity investigation over the last few years. And I got to meet them on a social distancing hangout a couple months ago. I don't really attend those anymore because I work on Sundays and I don't really have the time to engage anymore. But when I can, I pop in, and I was able to meet her on one of those. We had a really good conversation, so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. Like I'm always excited about sharing. I do have a couple announcements that I want to squeeze into this intro because none of these were in the place where I could talk about them yet last week. And I kind of don't want to wait until next week for the solo thing. So I'm going to try to squeeze it in real fast. I am planning the first Militantly Mixed virtual conference in March. It'll take place on March 19th. It'll be an all-day event. And I am in the process of lining up speakers for the different categories of times. So I will be able to provide more details about that in the future, but I just wanted to let you know that we are going to have a virtual conference coming up on March 19th, 2022. The next thing I want to talk about is I am planning a tour, if I can afford it. So far, it looks like a one city tour, but I'm going to try to do a multiple city tour. Back in 2019, if you've been with me for a while, you know that I was really getting excited about doing a tour of Militantly Mixed on the road. And I had gotten a taste of it in Sacramento, California, and Rockland because I had done a live in front of audience taping of Militantly Mixed with a guest, Clarmundo Sullivan, who was a huge HIV activist in the 80s, 90s, and actually continues to be, who happens to also be mixed. We did a live in front of an audience taping at the Lavender Library in Sacramento, California, which was an amazing venue to be able to do that. A long-standing queer library in Sacramento, a safe space for queer people in Sacramento to have gone to for the last 30 years. So the bug got bit there. And then I got to do some live in front of student tapings at Sierra College in Rockland, California. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to do this tour, the podcast thing. And then the panorama hit in 2020. And that was my plan. I was going to try to do once every couple months. I was going to try to go somewhere to a new city and do something. I'm ready to get that back going. I already know that there's some traveling I'll be doing in 2022 related to my comic book shop. And it just so happens that there's some alignment with a couple of those cities and the highest download cities that I have for the show. Right now, my top 6 downloaded cities are, in no particular order, are Seattle, Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, New York, and Atlanta. Those 6 cities are consistently where I get the highest downloads. The 7th city would be London. So if I can do that, I would love to do that too, but I don't think I can afford it anytime soon. And so that is the goal. I would like to do some Militantly Mixed on the road live tapings in the cities that I get the highest downloads so that those of you who listen to the show will get a chance to see it in person. And if I happen to have guests from those cities that have been on the show in the past, I would like to welcome them to the dais with me to basically do that live episode with them. So that is the goal. As of right now, I already know that I am traveling for sure to Atlanta in September. So Atlanta will be one of those cities. It's possible I'm going to be in Seattle in December 2022. So that might be one of the cities. And it's possible that I might be in New York in October 2022. So that at least those three cities might be more possible because I already know that I'll be traveling to those cities and what months I'm going to be traveling to those cities. So if you would like to see a live Militantly Mixed on the road, holla at your Mane. Let me know in the Instagram and the Twitters and the Facebooks and the emails so that I can get a gauge for whether or not we'll have a nice turnout for it. And then, if y'all know people who have venues, small black box theaters or coffee houses or bookstores or something like that, that have a meeting space, holla at your Mane. And I think that's kind of where I'll start. Doing it through the community. A lot of people offer to help, but because I run this as a business, I can't always get just like help. But what I could get is scouting locations and hookups between people who know people so that I can, make those deals happen. So if you'd like to see Militantly Mixed on the road in 2022 between June and December, holla at your Mane and let's make this happen. Let's make the tour happen. That's pretty much. There's a couple other things I want to talk about, but I'm not going to have a whole lot of time. The militantlymixed.com merch tab for our merchandise is back up and running. Well, it was still running, but for some reason, a couple of the t-shirts went down. I think the base t-shirt from the printing company that I use went away, so they took those t-shirts away. I was able to put those onto new shirts, new base shirts, and get those back up on the website. So Mixed in Hella Asian and Mixed in Hella Queer and Mixed in Hella Black. I'm going to be working on a new design for Mixed in Hella Black because I lost the original design and I don't like the replacement design that I did. So I'm going to be working on a different one for that, and I'll get that back up. I'm still looking for indigenous designers and Latine designers for those Mixed in Hella shirts, and so I don't have those up yet, but I do have a new shirt for Practice Radical Self-Care. While it's not specifically related to mixedness, it is related to all of our experiences in that, for some crazy ass reason, to advocate for yourself and for your mental health gets treated like it is the weirdest, most alien thing to do. And so athletes like Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles get mistreated because they decide to choose themselves over toxic environments, over terrible mistreatment, just because they are at the highest level of their sports. You also see it in actors, you see it in newscasters, you see it across the board where people are told to just shut up and play or just shut up and do whatever it is that we know you for. If you're an actor, just shut up and act. If you're an athlete, just shut up and play. And I want to throw my support for people who do choose themselves and their mental health, because I know it's hard for us. I do, and I know that our cultures teach us not to do it, and it really doesn't make any sense. I mean, just the idea that to take care of yourself is radical is ridiculous. So I do have a shirt out for that right now on the Militantly Mixed website as well. And I'm going to get a couple more designs up over the course of the next couple months. Some of them will be directly related to mixedness, and some of them will just be as a result of our experiences and stuff that'll come up. And I'll try to expand that a little bit more. I had a lot of fun with the new Be Your Mixed Ass Self t-shirt, fundraiser t-shirt for 2022. So I think I'm gonna do that. So yeah, head on over to militantlymixed.com, click on the merch tab, and you'll be able to pick up your Militantly Mixed logo tees, the Be Your Mixed Ass Self totes and water bottles, Practice Radical Self-Care t-shirts if you want. The Mixed in Hella lines are back up there. And, the holidays are coming. So, I'll put up a Black Friday discount, and Cyber Monday discount code for 20% off. Mixed 20, MIXED 20. If you use that code between Friday, November 26th and Monday, November 29th, we will do Mixed 20, MIXED 20, and you'll get 20% off on your t-shirt purchases, or your purchases from militantlymixed.com. And that should be it. Yeah, I think that's all I got. My birthday's in 10 days, so 44 is coming up. at the comic book shop. So if you want to follow us on the Instagrams, you'll be able to see it. We are hosting a cosplay fashion show for my birthday. So far I have a couple of cosplayers that have signed up. I have a lot of people saying they're gonna show up, but they haven't filled out the sign up form yet, so we'll see what happens. But the way that I'm celebrating my birthday is at the shop here in Houston, 2306 Stewart Street. We're having a cosplay fashion show from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. We'll be able to post some pictures on the Instagram and stuff like that for y'all to check out. But yeah, I don't know how many listeners I have in the Houston area. I would like to meet some of y'all since I'm out here. And of course, I will do some live tapings of Militantly Mixed here at the shop too at some point. So while Houston isn't one of our highest download cities, it is where I currently live. So if you are in the Houston area, come out and meet Mane. I'm at the Gulf Coast Cosmos comic book shop from Wednesdays through Sundays, 2306 Stewart Street, right off of Emancipation Avenue in the 3rd Ward. Come meet me. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'm hoping to close out this year really, really strong, even though it's been a tough year financially for the show. I'm trying to make some moves to be able to keep this going and not reduce any of the quality or reduce any of the content as a result. So we'll see. Well, I'm gonna keep trying. That being said, it is a fan-sponsored podcast, and if you would like to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/militantlymix, and that link is always in the show notes. You can support the show as low as $1 a month to as high as anything you wish, and there's different reward levels depending on what you choose. If you donate at the $5 a month level or more, you can watch a video version of the episodes, starting with episode 142. Those are exclusive to the $5 and above donations. And if you would like to support the show, but you don't want to commit to a monthly or annual sponsorship, you can go to paypal.me/militantlymixed and drop some coins in that tip jar, just to let me know that the show is meaningful to you and that you like it, you love it, and you want some more of it. And then, of course, there's always the merchandise on the militantlymixed.com website. This is how you support the show, including sharing with your friends, retweeting, regramming. If you take a screenshot of your phone when you're listening to it and put that up on the Instagram and tag me in it, I will respond to those as well. Put it in your stories, things like that. That also helps grow the show, because the more people who listen to it, the more opportunities we will have for funding to keep it going. And I think that's pretty much it for now. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Leah Ko. Today, I am joined by Leah, and why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and let's get into it.
Yeah, I love the new name, by the way. So excited for you. So I am Leah Ko Graham, and I just moved to Los Angeles a few months ago from Chicago. But prior to this, I've been in the Midwest pretty much my whole life. And my mom is Chinese, and my dad is a white boy.
It's like kind, or is it just a regular old white boy?
I have lots of other names, but I was like, which one should I choose? We'll just go with that one. Keep it mild for now. So yeah, and I grew up in an extremely small town in southern Indiana, like a village basically of 500 people. So we were the only.
Oh man.
Yeah, it was
rough.
That's small. We were the only completely white family in the whole area, not just the town, but like the county. People would come in briefly and then leave. No one knows why. But we were the only ones that stayed for forever, sadly. So Yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
So was it a military? I don't want to make the assumption because I also come from a white Asian military family situation. Is that how it happened?
No. I know
that's the stereotype.
Often, yes. My dad was in the military, but that's not how they met. They actually met at church. I always say sarcastically that it was a match made in heaven. Fetishization heaven. I say that dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, so they met. So my mom's parents immigrated from China and then started on the West Coast, and then long series of events, they ended up owning a laundromat in Southern Indiana. That was just a location that they sourced that didn't have those services. And so my mom's side was the first Chinese family in that area.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, so mom and dad met at church. So yeah, not the typical, meeting overseas, but pretty much everything else that could be stereotyped or assumed of a white man, Asian female, like 15-year age gap.
The greatest hits.
Yeah, I mean, I, pretty much have come to the conclusion that I'm like a child of yellow fever, that whole thing. So those definitely apply.
Yeah.
In all of their horror.
And I assume that because we've talked a little bit before about sort of just the last couple of years that you've been getting involved in mixed spaces, that you're starting to unpack probably stuff that you hadn't really known to acknowledge back when you were growing up.
I mean, it wasn't until really the last maybe 5 years that I even had close friends who were multiracial, and not even like close to my particular, but just multiracial in general, where there was some understanding. But then the last couple years, I made a really close friend in Chicago, the one that I was telling you should also be on the show. So hopefully we can get him on here at some point. But he's really helped me understand. And then I found like the Midwest Mixed Conference. And so, yeah, there's a lot about fetishization and a lot about my parents' relationship that I'm really just starting to understand at like almost 40. And
it's funny too, because through the show at different times of the show, there's either been like the really, really young crowd who they've been able to talk about it a little bit earlier than a lot of us that are in the 40 and up range.
Right.
And they feel like they're just now getting like, oh, I'm so behind. And I'm just like a whole 44-year-old going, yeah, you're behind.
Right.
Like, well,
if only I knew what you knew.
Right.
Like
we're
right?
unpacking right now. Yeah.
Well,
so
it's hard. There aren't a lot of resources, or they're hard to find, right? Like now I'm realizing there's these books and communities and different things, podcasts, right? But it took a while of searching to even find out where those exist.
Even just in the last 5 years, because when I first wanted to do the show, there weren't any mixed race podcasts. And then a couple years later, when I finally had the courage to press record, there were a few dead podcasts, like, 6 episodes maybe, and then they never put up another one again, or it was more journalistic things like Mixed in America from some news platform, or Mixed People in America or something like that. And I just hated that if the stories were being told by us, they were gone. They weren't active. And if they were being told by others, it was like there's these hybrid people amongst us type of like storyline. And that was just in the last 5 or so years. The show's been going on for the last 3 years now. And now there's a ton of mixed race podcasts, and there were books, but they were few and far between, or they were very academic in nature. So like up until I started the show, the only mixed race book I had ever read that I knew was specifically about mixed people was an academic book by Naomi Zach. And for the longest time, she was the only name I knew. Like the only name that I knew in that world.
And a lot of, I'm not trying to be like rude here, but a lot of those books are also written by monoracial people, and they're not great. They're interpreting, there's like assumptions being made, or like ways that they're interpreting data or interviews that I'm like, wait,
Right.
what? You came to what conclusion?
Even if it was a biracial person, they were coming from the perspective of their white half of their mix.
Right.
And that was a struggle for me too, because it was just like they're othering themselves and othering us in the process of writing about us as an other. It was just too many things, you know.
And, I mean, I think that's another piece of why I think it's taken me so long to unpack some of these things is because I was like gaslit out of my identity my whole life, right? Growing up in whiteness. I mean, and this came from my dad, this came from like relatives, like my Chinese relatives, this came from lots of different sides,
right?
Where it was like, oh, you're not Chinese, you're white. And so I think and I never believed that, I never identified as that, but when you constantly have people questioning and gaslighting you about your authenticity, it makes it hard to really like move past that in a like substantial way. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, it does. And a lot of us, the way we maneuver, and I think maybe for any of us that are mixed Asian, I mean, I don't have a very explicit Asian appearance. I have coloring maybe and hair, but unless I'm standing next to my Japanese family, it's not clear necessarily that I'm an Asian mix. And but then someone like my mom or someone like you who looks like an Asian person with slightly bigger eyes, or you know, like that kind of thing. Like same with my family too. Like they all have like Asian shaped eyes, but they're bigger than my grandma's eyes or something like that, or you know, smaller nose, mouth, and bigger faces, because we all got these big old
wide faces.
Moon faces. My big moon face and my bowling ball head, like all that kind of stuff that we have. Like we maneuver, we're like this patchwork quilt of whatever it is we're mixed with, but then we just want someone to identify us. Like, I see that you're this thing and that you're something else, or that I can see what that something else is. But it's like, it's got to be one or the other.
Yes.
You're vaguely Asian, so I'm going to go ahead and say you're Asian. You're vaguely white, so I'm going to go ahead and say you're white. And that can be just so infuriating because it takes you out of the decision.
Yes, exactly. Which I mean, I know we all, pretty much all of us deal with this, but yeah, it's like to my white side of the family, I mean, except for my dad, he's a whole nother case on all levels. But you know, my other relatives, it's like we were definitely othered as like Asian, like hardcore.
Yeah.
But then the Chinese side have been like, a lot of them have been so bad about like, I mean, I had a cousin recently that told me, I was talking about possibly changing my last name to my mom's family name, which is Ko. And she was like, well, you know, what are you going to change it to? Because their last name is Wong. And so I said Ko, and she was like, oh, good, because you're not a Wong, which was my mom's maiden name. And I'm like, you know what? You know what you can do?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you don't get to tell me, like, if
like you're literally telling me like I'm not a part of your family. Like, what the hell? So, but yeah, I mean, it's only been in really just in the past year or two that because I've gotten those comments my whole life. It's really just been in the past year or two that I've like really like taken a firm stance of like, no, like that's, I don't even want to call it a microaggression, because I think
it's like an
micro about it. It's a macro
super aggressive. Yeah. No,
so
I think there's a lot of things that we call microaggressions that are clearly like overly aggressive aggressions.
Right. Yeah. I'm like, that's racist. That's mono racism. And no, absolutely not.
Like, you're ripping our skin away from us almost by making these decisions, or, you know, our like, culture, like all the things.
I've even referred to it, and I know some people think, oh, that's like too radical, but I've referred to it as like ethnocide. Like ethnocide is like erasing someone's like identity, language, culture, heritage. And that's what I feel like people are doing when they're like imposing on me that I'm white. I'm like, you have no idea what I've experienced in my life, right? Like I grew up with a KKK like sympathizing father. Like I have racial trauma from
Don't you just love the white family member that is overtly racist but married a yellow or brown person? Like it just we all got one. I know
it happens all the time.
A lot of us have some of that. Yeah.
And yet people just think, there's so many people out there that are like, oh, like that shows you're not racist. Like I had an aunt that recently told me that she didn't believe that my dad was like racist because he married my mom. Like that was the proof.
That's all you need.
And I was just like a big sigh. Like there's this meme that shows a peacock with its like feathers all out, like a male peacock, and it's like rolling my ass eyeballs. All 100 of my ass eyeballs. That's how I felt.
I've never seen that. It's awesome.
Giant sigh.
Right?
Like, this again.
There's so many things. And it's funny too, because I think like at this point I had to have heard them all. Like at this point I had to have heard them all, and no one's going to get me again. And then just in the last couple of years, I talked about it on another episode, but a white woman who's wearing really dark glasses, like the kind of glasses they give you after you have like a cataract or something like that.
Oh yeah.
She we were talking and she was patting herself on the back about some sort of anti-racism work she was doing. And then I had said something about like something that made it obvious that I was a person of color, and she goes, "Oh, are you a woman of color?" And I didn't know how to deal with it, so I was just sitting here like, what? And then she takes her glasses down and she goes, "Oh, you are. I thought you were regular." And I didn't
wait. She said, "I thought you were regular."
I thought you were a regular. So like even worse than I thought you were regular. Like I thought you were a regular.
I thought you were a normal human being.
So I'm just like, well, first of all, what is a regular? Like obviously you mean a white woman, but like I can't deal with someone thinking I'm a white woman, but that you would refer to that as a regular, like kicked my butt. And this was just in the last like 3. So I was definitely doing the show since then. So it was just like in the last 2 to 3 years right before COVID, I think.
I'm sorry.
And I was just like
dehumanizing. I mean, like so dehumanizing.
It is. And you just think I think me, up until recently, I changed the moniker to Mixed Auntie May. But up until recently, I was like, I'm Mixed Girl Maine. You're not going to shake me with this. Like this is the stuff I do. And then someone says something like that to me and I'm a puddle of.
They're so creative.
It's amazing.
So creative with their racism. I'm like, imagine what you could do in the world if you put your creativity, your creative energy towards something like positive.
Right.
Imagine. But
it is amazing. And the fact like it's always a surprise when whiteness is undoing whatever our brownness is. Because they know that they can see this as different. Like they know that they can, and they know that we can't walk around and maneuver as a white person at any given time. Like there's no circumstance in which you or I, with the faces that we have, could maneuver a space and someone would legitimately think of us as white people.
Right. I mean, but I've had those moments too recently. Like I had a super duper close friend, like one of my best friends, who got really aggressive with me about telling me that I was white passing. And I'm just like, I can count on one hand in 4 decades the number of times someone has thought that I'm white. It's less than 5. Like it's not many at all. But she was like super aggressive about it. And I was just like, don't try to tell me what my experiences are. But it shook me like I literally, and I don't hate to admit this, but I am kind of like, I guess not embarrassed, but I was surprised at how much that got to me. And I think it was because it was someone so close to me. But I literally was like looking in the mirror, like, is that what people see? Just like questioning what people see when they look at me, even though, like I said, it's almost never happened.
Yeah.
And what does happen all the time is people speaking to me in Spanish, or people like, so
now you're in LA, it's going to happen way more.
Oh my gosh. Like so much. Like my first week here, it was like, I was looking at apartments and this woman who didn't even speak conversational English, the neighbor comes bursting into the apartment and she goes, "Mexico?" And I was like, what? Why are you yelling at me? She was like from somewhere in Europe. She was like a little old, like auntie, like grandma in a 90, like sitting on her porch. And I was like, why is she screaming Mexico? And then I was like, oh,
because she's racist. That's right.
Yeah.
Anyway. No, it's definitely going to happen to you. So I don't know what the Latin American diasporic population of Indiana is, but I do know LA, and you are going to get it all the time. In LA.
Isn't that, I mean, that was one of the things that really blew my mind, I guess, in a new way. I can't remember which episode it was of yours, but it was someone that grew up, who was this? That grew up overseas and lived in Venezuelan?
So that was Ayumi. They are Venezuelan and Japanese. They grew up in Brazil and Philippines and the States.
I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was that episode. But it just, as you all were talking, it was like, oh my gosh, like it just hit me again, like how we're perceived so differently from region to region, from country to country. And then we have to try to figure out how people are, I mean, if we are racially ambiguous, right? We have to figure out how people are reading us and figure out the context, the racial dynamics and of that environment, and then try to figure out how to navigate. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's so much. So yeah, like moving out here, it's a different experience than what I had in Chicago. Not drastically different, but still, yes, much more reading me as
I would get Spanish a lot, and when I would reply that I don't speak Spanish, I'd get that offense face of just like, how dare you, and then
you're being snooty.
And then I would be like, I'm Japanese and black, like sorry, and then I'm apologizing that I'm black and Japanese, like what, it doesn't make any sense. And then people just wouldn't believe me. So there was that too. Like I get people who won't believe me. They're like, you're obviously and it's usually like Puerto Rican or Dominican or Mexican. Those are the three that I get. And then here in Houston, though, I live in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So I've only been spoken Spanish to one time since I've been here, which is such a huge change for me because it's usually almost constant. And even with having a retail space, like it's only been one time that a person walked in and asked me if I spoke Spanish, and I said I didn't. And then they looked at me and I said Japanese and Black, and they're like, okay. But then they didn't speak English, and so we were just like pointing to things, and it was like I was like, what are the words for books? Like I'm sitting here like because I didn't even take Spanish in school. I took French, so I'm just like, what is it? It just, I ended up picking things up and just being like this, like, and I
acted out.
I don't even have basic Spanish. And even though I grew up in Southern California, like I don't even have basic Spanish. And so I kind of felt bad at that point that I didn't. But I find that if they are a Spanish speaker, I apologize while telling them that I'm not whatever they think I was.
So that they're not like offended or.
And I'm like, why do I even apologize? I could just be like, Black and Japanese, or American. We don't speak any other languages anyway. Like I could do that.
So sad.
I speak a little bit of French. I speak a little bit of Japanese. I can swear in Arabic. That's it. That's all I got. Because my husband's Arabic, and my old best friends were Arabic. So like I know the things that I can't say in front of Arabic people if I don't want to get the shit kicked out of me, because the kids taught me how to say really bad things. And so like, that's all I know. So I don't really speak any Spanish at all. Like I maybe have 4 or 5 words. Like that's how little for a language that I can hear often. It's really bad that I don't have any of it retained at all. But it happens all the time. And I thought, maybe if my hair was straighter, it'd be less like that. But it's still like, even in LA, all the time it would happen. But now it doesn't, and it's weird. Like I'm closer to Mexico than I was,
right?
Yeah, like than I was a few months ago. But yeah, it doesn't happen all the time. But I've had like Dominicans scream at me for denying that I'm like, to say I'm not Dominican, and they're like, you are, look at your face and stuff, and I'm like, I promise you, like I'm like, I want them to know, like, this is the thing that I got. I don't got the thing you got, I got this thing. So it's happened.
Rough. I'm sorry you have to deal with that. I mean,
well, I would rather be screamed at by a Dominican who thinks I'm Dominican for wanting me to be Dominican than than a white person that's just like, what are you other? I need to figure like, honestly, if I had to choose.
Does that show how much we're over whiteness, that you would rather be like
bring me the Dominicans that will scream at me.
like, I choose A.
I'm like, come on. And you know what? If it came down to it, I'll move to the DR. I'll start waving the flag. I'll eat the food. Like, I got no problems there. I just don't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if the Dominicans want me and the Japanese don't, maybe we'll make a trade. I don't know. Maybe there's a Dominican the baseball player that the Japanese really want, and we could just go ahead and
maybe
it's a whole thing.
Maybe include me in the deal, because
just like
I'm up for trade too, because I don't feel like my East Asian people want me either. So
that's been the struggle for me the longest. Like I identify with my Blackness, I'm accepted in Blackness, I'm comfortable in it. But with my Japanese, with Japanese, it's 2 layers of, maybe 3. There is, Japanese aren't joiners in terms of Asian Americanness. Like they are assimilators. Okay. So like you don't even have many Japanese communities. There's San Francisco, San Jose, and LA. And then there used to be Washington, D.C. But there's not a whole lot of places that have like Japanese communities where Japanese people live and shop and work and the whole kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I lived in one of the 2 Japanese communities in LA, but even then I felt removed there. And the only time I really got to experience anything was when I'd go to the grocery store, the Japanese grocery store. And, I would perform my Japaneseness there, but I wasn't Japanese. I was an other, Yeah. So with Japanese, I really struggled. Then if I tried to join like Asian American groups in high school or college or whatever, it was sort of like, it was both being mixed and being Japanese, specifically because everybody in those Asian American groups were usually Chinese, Korean, and Filipino.
Right.
And I wasn't like them. So
animosity.
Yeah. And, you do have to think of as a Japanese walking into an Asian space, you do have to think about what Japan did across Asia. Right. So I wasn't aware of that when I was younger. I was just trying to join with other yellow people because I'm yellow too. And I'm like, hey, let's be yellow together. Like
you were literally getting like multiple levels of side eye, which is hard.
And I didn't understand it. And it took, time and education and stuff like that. And so I became more cautious entering Asian American spaces. Yeah. I did end up joining an Asian American podcasting association, and I have been accepted there. And more than that, encouraged to like be my Japaneseness and, allow that to allow me to occupy space that way. And that's been really emotional and strange and uncomfortable at times because I don't know how to be welcomed by Asians, if that makes sense. So like I try to do that amongst us mixed Asians through this show, like make a welcoming space for mixed Asians, but it's weird to go into other people's Asian spaces or Asian American spaces and be like, I'm claiming this, I'm owning this. And then the apologeticness kicks in because it's like, I'm sorry, I'm Japanese because of the past. It's not because I'm sorry, like I enjoy my Japaneseness, but it's
complex.
It is. And it's weird to be a brown colonizer, to come from brown colonizers and stuff like that. So, and then on the other side, we're British. So,
you're like colonizers everywhere.
Yeah. It's just like, I can't escape it. So, so there, there's that kind of stuff too. So at least within Militantly Mixed and with these conversations I have with other mixed Asians too, it's like, you and I probably have a lot more in common than me and Japanese people or you and Chinese people, because we have been a watered down version of what they expect Asianness to be like.
Yeah, I don't know if I consider it watered down though.
I'm talking about from their perspective, not that we believe ourselves to be. I'm sorry, I should have probably.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I think something I've kind of been thinking about lately is how closed-minded folks are by, thinking, to be Japanese has to look like XYZ, like these very,
tiny detailed, anime looking girls and stuff like that.
Yeah, like anything from body type to language to where you live to, all the things. I'm just like, you know what, that's actually really narrow-minded. And that's really helped me to think of like the Chinese diaspora. I'm like, we're everywhere. And there are mixes of, there are like Chinese Cubans, and there are like, now there's all these, this is problematic as hell, but there's all these like Chinese folks in Africa now, colonizing.
Right.
but like,
yeah, right.
And having babies. But I mean, even historically, like decades ago, like we're all over the place.
Yeah.
But to only conceive of Asianness as this monoracial, well, I mean, even that, I'm like, who's really monoracial? Even that, I'm like, I don't even think that is legit. Like, who is actually monoracial?
Like everybody migrated from this someplace. So
and everybody's mixed somewhere along the line. I mean, I think the majority of people. But yeah, I think just conceiving of it as like, wow, that's a really closed-minded way to conceive of whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
It helps me not take it to heart so much, because it is hard, even as much as I try to be like solid and confident in my identity, right? That people are looking at you like you're saying, as if you're not enough. And especially with Asian folks, like, I love us, but there's high expectations.
There's a lot of work to do. Oh, I think we have a couple, as Americans, we have a couple different layers of separation too, because we're not Asian in Asia. We're Asians here. So we've adopted a monoracial identity amongst immigrant Asians, I guess, here, as not you and I, but the society at large. And so like we have to kind of, like, as you and I entering those spaces, we have to adopt something that we wouldn't even be able to naturally adopt if we were back home.
Right. That's exactly what again, another recent realization with some of these Chinese family members that were like literally giving me shit. Like I recently confronted a bunch of them about telling me that I was white, telling me I wasn't a Wong, all of these things. Cause it's this whole, like, my mom's side of the family, there are 4 siblings, and 3 of them did not marry Chinese folks. So they're like, I have 2 sets of Blasian cousins, an aunt and uncle that married Black spouses, and then my mom married white. So like the majority of the family is multi-racial. They're gonna like give us shit and like act superior. And so it just dawned on me. I was like, if you motherfuckers were in China, you'd be an ABC. American born Chinese, which is derogatory.
Right. Yeah.
Y'all would be an ABC in China.
And we would be fetishized because
you
want
to punch down on me because I'm multiracial. I'm like, fuck out of here. I'm tired of these games.
The other thing,
authenticity games.
The other thing that's frustrating in terms of Asianness, and I experienced this on the Japanese side, and then I've talked to people on various Asian mixes that feel the same way too, is this idea that like mixing with anybody makes you not Asian, whatever your Asian is, right? Whereas like here in America, there's literally this thing that white people created called the 1 drop rule that said if you even were a drop of black blood, you were black. And you flip it on that side. So if we're mixed with both of these countries, or both of these different societies or whatever, in America, I'm black because I have a black dad.
One drop.
And in Japan, I'm not Japanese because I'm mixed with something else. So are you telling me that like blackness and or whiteness is so potent and powerful that it squashes your Asian genetics? Because that tells me that you don't think Asian genetics are superior. You know what I'm saying? Like it's so backwards. Like at least with white people with the 1 drop rule, they were kind of like explicitly like, that's some powerful shit. So I'm gonna go ahead and call you all that, they were more explicit about it. Whereas like in Japan, it's like, are you really telling me that you think that because I'm mixed with black and white, because I do have mixed with white in there too, that means that like it thwarts my Japanese?
That's like a really good point.
My hair is Japanese, my skin tone is Japanese. Where do you think I get this from? Like where did I get this from? This defeated black, like in terms of I could have been darker skinned, right? So trying to explain that to like that kind of dyed in the wool Asian that is just like, we must maintain purity.
Right. Well, and that was something with one of these aunts that I called out, the one who was like, your dad, we don't believe you that your dad was racist. Then, I was confronting her about the whole like telling me I'm white and how hurtful that was and how inappropriate. And she was like sticking by her guns and just like, well, you just have to accept it. And I was like, no,
I don't have to
actually,
do shit.
I don't.
Yeah,
I don't. But thank you for trying.
You
and
don't
then,
get to tell
she
me.
had the thought, you know, because her kids are dating. They raise their kids in like a town that's like 97% white, and they're dating, you know, 99% chance they'll marry someone white. And it dawned on her, right? She was like, I guess she made this little side comment. I guess they'll do the same to my grandkids. I'm like, yeah,
oh, duh.
They will.
Yeah.
Will you come to your senses then and maybe think that you should like rethink how you're treating multiracial people? Time will tell, but I'm out. It's too late for me here because I can't keep doing this, you know?
It's so much work. It's so exhausting. And when you have to do it with your own family too, it's even more frustrating because it's just like, these are the people that you expect are supposed to care about you.
Yeah, I have like, here are my options. KKK sympathizing, Blue Lives Matter, redneck motherfuckers on one side, and these fuckers on the other side.
You're not Chinese enough, yeah.
And I'm just like, this is a nightmare.
So you find your mixed tribe and then you move on because that's the option.
Yeah, like what? And I mean, you add a layer. So in my 20s, I spent a lot of time overseas, a couple years in South Africa, which was like completely life-changing. And then I ended up getting a master's in African American and African studies, and then got really involved with like activism, Black Lives Matter. And so, I mean, like, I think that's a complicating layer. Not that I'm Black, I know I'm not Black, but just my investment in the community and my advocacy, like, I think that really confuses people too, and is probably yet another strike against on my East Asian side, because we all know there's hella anti-Blackness in a lot of Asian communities, but I think it's like yet one more strike. I'm too loud, I'm too noisy. I'm pro-Black people, like how I'm almost 40 and never been married, don't have kids, like how much, you know, how many other ways can I disappoint my my Chinese relatives? Let's see.
Right. Yeah. I know sometimes there is a little bit of that too. Just be like, I'm going to go a totally different way for this. Just for you. Like, just
dedicated to. Name the dedication. I mean, it hasn't been intentional. It's just like, I'm living my life and I'm not going to not do it because you're going to disapprove. But
imagine, and like, what are the options for you now? If you're not Chinese enough and you marry a Chinese person, are you downgrading their Chineseness because, you know, for them, or on the white side too, like if you end up marrying a white person and partnering and having babies, are you downgrading their whiteness? Or if you go with a Black partner, if you know, like, or a different kind of Asian, because we got that problem too, right? Like I had a crush on a half a Korean, and my grandma let me have it, you know.
So fucking complicated.
So like it just, you can't.
I remember, I mean, this was probably almost 20 years ago at this point, but one of my brother's white friends asked me if I date outside of my race. And I was like early 20s, still didn't really know, you know, was like, hadn't really processed through a lot of this, but I just looked at him like, so many questions. What are you perceiving my race to be?
Right.
I live in a town that has like 0.5% Asian people, that's monoracial Asian people. Like there are I don't know any multiracial Asian white folks except my brothers.
Right, so exactly. So my option are my brother, or
so yes, I do date out of my race because like
unless there's a mixed Chinese white country folk dating thing or whatever, like, you know,
not like they were just running around everywhere in Southern Indiana, right? It's not like I had a whole pool of them. So but I just looked at him like, I don't even know what the fuck that means, because first I have to know how you're reading me.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. But then I think because I do, you know, date interracially, because that really is like my only option, or has been. But yeah, then you get all these other dynamics, and there's a lot of fetishization, not just of me being Asian, but of me being multiracial,
right,
and Asian. So there's like a double, I feel like, dose of fetishization, and it's just so hard to figure out how people are coming at you.
Yeah.
Which
it can be well, when you start thinking about dating, it can be gross. So my husband is half white and Arabic, and I mentioned something about us being interracial relationship before, and he's like, are we? And I'm like, you and I we don't have the same things in us at all. And he's like, yeah, but like, we're both pale. And so like, that's his level of just like, he wasn't even thinking about it. And then, my ex-girlfriend was Black and Puerto Rican, and somebody asked me about being in an interracial relationship with her. And I was like offended because I was thinking of myself in Black terms. And so I was just like, what? And I was like, because I'm Japanese?
You're like, that's not me.
Yeah. So like, it was just so confused. So like, even internally for me, what I would think of as an interracial relationship would be my half Arabic, half white husband. But when I dated a Black girl, I didn't think of that as interracial, even though we would read as interracial if we were walking down the street.
Right.
Yeah. So dating's weird.
I think that speaks to, because it sounds like you grew up in a lot of Blackness.
I grew up in Blackness. Yeah.
Like primarily how you did identify or do identify.
I still do.
Like,
yeah. I mean, I always say that it's hierarchical for me. So like, I am Black first, and then I'm Japanese, and then you can bring in the white stuff. But yeah, that my culture is Black, so I identify that way. I
think that's something that especially monoracial folks have so much trouble. I don't know if they have trouble wrapping their minds around it, or if they have trouble accepting it. Because I think,
or they just don't want to.
Or they don't want to. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I said. I think they just don't want to accept it. Because that was a huge part for me as well. Like, even though I grew up in this very white area, my mom was the main, like 90%, 95% of like our time was spent with our mom. And especially for me, as like, I had, two brothers, but especially as like the only girl, I spent a ton of time with my mom. And so and in a white community, we were othered, constantly.
Right. Yeah.
Like, we were very much seen as not white.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, so that's like primarily how that, I guess that's my hierarchical,
yeah.
My primary identity. And I think that's why it sucks so much because I was very much I might be this like outspoken activist now, but like, I was raised very much to be like the proper Asian girl, like
same,
no talking back, no tones, no. And then there was a layer of like conservative evangelicalism on top of that. So it was like deep, right?
Yeah.
Like, really deep about what proper behavior looked like for me.
Right.
And it's just been over the years that I've come out of that, much to many people's
like, what the heck?
disappointment and disapproval. I've gotten very loud and opinionated, which I always was. I just had that squashed. But yeah, I think that's why it also is so upsetting and offensive when people try to take that away from me. And it like erases all of the experiences, right? If you try to tell me I'm white, like, it erases all of the experiences with racism. My 30 plus years in Southern Indiana. Like, I literally grew up in a town where the Klan was still meeting in the town square openly, like without fear, like 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
And not that they ever like fucked with us, but that was the environment.
Yeah.
And so, like I mentioned, my dad being like super racist and stuff. So it's like you're erasing all of these like very like things that are good about my culture and like being Chinese, and things that are wonderful and I love, and then also like these very traumatic experiences, but you're just like, you're whitewashing all of that. Not you, obviously, but when people try to
the outside you.
This identity on me that I'm like, no, that doesn't fit, but people somehow feel like they get to decide.
And I don't know what it'll take for people to stop doing that. So the way I do it is just try to gum up the works, by like, if someone asks me what I am or where I'm from, I do the whole like, oh, California. well,
Mhm.
you know, Long Beach, Sacramento. I was born in Sacramento. I
Subvert
grew
it.
up in Long Beach. I'm a military kid, so I also grew up, you know, so I'll do that whole thing to like exhaust them
Yes.
until they realize the question you're asking is stupid and offensive and you don't deserve that information.
Yeah.
And once that started to fit, once that clicked in, it was just like, you know, if I gotta gum up the works, it actually kind of gets fun after a while too. To do that to someone and watch them struggle because
Watch
they're
them
like,
get
I
frustrated.
want the racist question, but I don't want to say it. You know,
Right.
like
Try to
that
figure out
thing.
how to like reframe their
Yeah.
coded language.
Yeah, it's
in
like
a
you're not
different
gonna trick me,
way.
Bubba. Like, you know,
You're like,
you're not gonna do it.
you're like, I know that you know that I
yeah.
know. Let's
And you know, I said Bubba, but it's usually a Karen, and usually it is just like, oh, but I couldn't possibly. It's obviously because I'm interested in you that I'm, you know, and stuff like that. And I've had to tell a few people, like, you know, I know what you're trying to ask.
Yeah.
I'm trying to point out to you that you don't deserve that information,
Yeah,
and that you shouldn't ask that because it's very triggering for a lot of us, and you just happen to hit the one person that is going to be able to thwart you on this
Right.
time, you know.
Yeah.
But I don't want you to do that to someone else because what if they're not going to be able to be vocal like me?
You're gonna learn today.
You're gonna learn today, exactly. So yeah, it's usually a Karen. Sometime a man, if a man does it, it's usually because they're picking up Asian vibes and they want to know if I'm the right kind of Japanese wife, which has been asked before. But they usually don't care about what my thing is. They just want to, you know, it's just the how can I fetish
asked you if you were...
Oh yeah, I've had a couple people ask me in different ways, but the way that it was asked is basically like, are you a proper Japanese wife?
Hell no, motherfucker.
And I'm like, well, I'm not full Japanese, so I guess if you mean full, I'm not proper. But if you mean fill in the blank racist idea, no, you know, stuff like that. So
meaning, are you submissive and docile and passive?
If you're all of the sexual,
are you gonna wait on me?
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
And can my family own you?
Yeah, basically, yeah. And actually sometimes that's been asked to my husband too, like, you know, that's been asked of him.
Wait, like about you?
About me. Yeah. Did he get the like, is the Japanese side more or is the black side more?
These are things that just make me be like, I hate
the world.
I mean, really.
So yeah, it's
like, I try not to live there, but really, I'm just like, what the fuck is wrong with
like the earth is trash, but it is what it is. But we are getting a little bit close to the end of our thing. So what I like to ask all of my guests is what you love most about being mixed, since what we have established is that what we don't love about being mixed is people being trash. Outside of that, what do you do love about being mixed?
What do I love about being mixed? I think I mean, I don't know if this is particular to being mixed, but I think these days I just love being myself and not letting anybody define like what box I'm supposed to be in, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, not that I can't be rattled. We talked about that, but I do think after a lot of years of work, not that I purposely try to confuse people, but it's just like, yeah, if you don't get it, why I can identify as like Chinese only sometimes, but I would never identify as white only. If that feels off to you or confusing, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
Go wrestle with it.
Yeah.
I think I kind of like, I guess I kind of,
you're like, here's some chalk, there's a chalkboard, go work it out for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I've kind of grown to like, not that I think I'm some like special little snowflake, but I like that I mess with people's minds a little bit, right? Or like, I read a study recently, or saw it. I don't think I read the whole thing, but it was talking about how multiracial people take more, I think they called it like cognitive work than monoracial people to interact with, right? Because people are trying to figure out how the identity works and how to stereotype us and what boxes to put us in, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, yeah, I just kind of enjoy just kind of like being me in their face, and they can
and
go
forcing them to work the muscle.
and they can go work it
didn't.
out.
Yeah,
Kind of
yeah.
what you were saying, like, I don't have to explain, I don't have to give you the answers, I don't have to make sense to you. That's not my job. Like, your feelings are not my responsibility. Your level of knowledge or lack thereof is not my responsibility. I'm just gonna be me, and if you choke on it, you choke on it.
Yeah.
And
I love the idea of like keeping a Karen up at night, because 3 years later she still doesn't know what I am.
Yes. And I did, yes. Karen's been on her 1,263rd day of insomnia.
Yeah.
She's
like,
raging.
We just sat together on the plane and she wouldn't tell me, you know, like.
Exactly. I mean, there are times when that can be frustrating, right? Or cause pain. We talked about all that.
Right,
but for the most part, I'm just like, you know what? I don't fit in a box, and I'm just going to own that and do with it what you want, or don't.
Yeah.
Bye. Like, just, yeah. It's free
now.
Yeah, I think it's really freeing. And even sometimes the expectations, right? It's like, well, y'all want to tell me I'm not Chinese, so then don't put all your expectations on me. You can't have both.
Yeah.
Because that's what I get, right? We want to like gaslight you about your identity, but then we want to put all the same expectations that we put on Chinese women onto you. I'm like, no, you don't get both.
We don't get to do
so
both
I'm
things.
just I'm gonna like opt out of all of it.
Yeah.
I guess is a good way to put it. So
that's nice. Yeah. I like that.
But yeah, it feels good to just feel more comfortable in my skin. I think there's always more work to do, but just to feel more comfortable and not worry so much about labels and boxes, and just try to like blow the boxes open.
Yeah.
You know, mess the boxes up.
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show with me and engaging. I know you've been on the group chat a couple of times, and you've been engaging on the group and the Facebook group and stuff like that. So I hope you feel that you are a cousin, because now that you have been on the show, you are a cousin.
Hey, cuz. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell people how to find you, or no? Because you don't have to.
Sure. So I'm Leah, Leah Ko, Ko on Facebook. I am on some other social media, but I'm not super active. I guess I'm old. That dates me, doesn't it?
The Facebooks. I'm on the Facebooks.
I'm on the Facebook, the social media Facebooks.
I haven't figured out the tickety talks yet. That's what I say. Like, I like to watch the tickety talks, but I don't know how to make the tickety talks. But yeah,
I am on Instagram and a couple other spots, but for some reason I just haven't gotten into it as much. So that's awesome.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Fury. Music is by David Bogan the One. You can follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed. If you'd like to become a sponsor of Militantly Mixed, please go to patreon.com/militantlymixed for monthly sponsorship, or paypal.me/militantlymixed for a one-time only donation. And if you like what you hear on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to be your mixed-ass self. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.